Hello everybody. Hey, welcome back. I thought today would take a little deeper in-depth look at the Toro 634. This is a continuation from the last video I put out, the golf turf rotor by Toro. And remember we discussed briefly, it looked like it had a valve-in head inside the body of the head. And I do a little more research on the thing, and yes, it does indeed have a valve-in head. It's a normally open type valve that's in there. The way you see the sprinkler head right now is the way I bought it. It's set up right now in a way to where it could operate on a non-pressure lateral line. There is a valve inside the head, but it can be activated by removing the tubing from the bottom there and putting in another tubing that would go to a hydraulic sprinkler controller somewhere else. And that would actually operate the head individually. So that means that the lateral lines going to the head would be under pressure all the time, even when the head is off. The way it's set up now, it would go to where it could operate on a non-pressure lateral line that could have several heads on it at one time, operating from a master remote control valve. So what I'm going to do now is demonstrate how the head works on a non-pressure lateral line. And let's do this. So you'll see it go on and off right here with my little hand ball valve. That's what they call a non-pressure lateral line, coming from a control valve someplace. So what we're going to do now, we're going to remove that bypass tubing on there and put on another tubing that's going to be under pressure all the time. So now we have this 1/4 inch line pressure line hooked up to the bottom of the Toro sprinkler head. And basically it's a control line under pressure, basically coming off my hose. Normally this would go to an automatic sprinkler controller, a hydraulic one at that. And that runs all the way back to another hose I have in the yard. What this is going to do is operate the valve with the valve in head. Before we get started on the operation of the head, I'm going to show you a parts explosion, what the valve in head looks like on a parts diagram. So now we're going to go ahead and operate the head through this control tubing. Through my little Mickey Mousey setup here that goes from garden hose, the tubing, there's actually enough water bleeding off of there where it'll bleed enough water to operate the head. So I go and shut this off and the head will come on. There we go. Turn the water on and off we go again. And let's do this a couple more times. There's the hose. Turn it off and there we go. There's pretty much no limit on the distance on the control tubing. I've seen them as far as 1/4 of a mile, half a mile away from the sprinkler controller to operate the remote valve or sprinkler heads. As long as the control tubing has no air in it, you pretty much get a good reaction as far as the head turning on and off. The biggest problem you would have you'll be getting air in the line of the control tubing line, and that acts like a compression or a cushion, like a shock absorber. And you either get a real slow reaction or sometimes no reaction at all. So this is a normally open system. Again, it takes water pressure from the controller, in this case this hose, to turn the head off, and to keep the head off. So there's water pressure charging the line all the time. That's called a normally open system. The best way to remember, for me anyway, was what happens to the sprinkler head if you have line pressure to the head all the time, but you have no controlling water in the tubing. In this case, the controlling water in the tubing is now off, so now the sprinkler head is on. So I call it a normally open system. The reverse would be on a closed system, normally closed, to where what would happen on the sprinkler head or the valve if it was normally closed. Basically, if you had no line pressure on it and the head stays closed or the remote valve stays closed, then it's a normally closed system. In that case, you would take line water from the control tubing to open the valve or the sprinkler head. So that's kind of the way it is. Hope you like this, and we can enjoy the watering for a while. It's still nice and hot here on the West Coast, and getting wet by the sprinkler actually feels wonderful. Have any questions or thoughts, leave them in the comments and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. All right, I hope you enjoyed this video. We'll see you soon. Let's shut this off now one more time. Off it goes. One last final thought I forgot to mention in the video is what the control tubing pressure needs to be. In this case, it has to be equal to whatever the water main pressure is that's supplying the head or the remote valve. For an example, let's say you got 100 pounds pressure in a system that feeds all the sprinkler heads or remote valve. The control tubing has to be 100 pounds as well. If you have an offset and balance, its system is not going to work. The valves won't stay closed, or the valves will not open if it was a normally closed system. So that's pretty important, something to think about. So anyways, all right. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you soon.